All right. Hello. Welcome back to another Trek Talk live stream. All right. So we're jumping into season 2 starting this week. This week's episode is Catspaw. All right. Now, before I go any further, please. Oh, I see. Hello, J Rocker. Hello, man. Good to see you. Thank you for stopping by. Please do like the stream while you're here, and if you haven't subbed to the channel, please do sub to the channel. Now, I guess we'll go ahead and jump into it here. So, as always, I will be reading from Mark Cushman's book, These Are the Voyages, for behind the scenes information on this episode. Now, this episode written by Robert Bloch, although DC Fontana did do some rewriting on it, and it is directed by Joseph Pevney. This is from the TV guide for October 21st, 1967. Castles, dungeons, witches, and black cats pervade this episode as Kirk seeks a rational explanation of and escape from the alien forces that have lured him to Pyrus 7. It's a dark, forbidding planet devoid of life, at least as Earthlings know it. So Sylvia and Karab are visitors to this dead world, and an advanced probe from a colonizing race looking to push out into the galaxy. Taking human form, Sylvia now has a growing desire to experience pleasures of the flesh, and she wants Kirk. Catspaw was designed to be a Halloween show and examine the hidden torture chamber known as the subconsciousness. McCoy says it best: illusions and reality, sometimes I wonder if we'll ever know the difference. The stronger theme comes courtesy of Gene Roddenberry and his rewrite. It explores how human sensation, emotional as well as physical, can block out all reason and must be managed and even fought. Hedonism, combined with perverse curiosity or sociopathic behavior, will inevitably lead to one's downfall. Catspaw is an entertaining episode if one is satisfied with a spook house ride and not looking for much logic or reason. The silliness begins in the teaser after crewman Jackson returns to the ship dead with a voice emitting from his corpse, threatening a curse. Despite this warning and with no security guards to accompany them, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy beam down to the planet. This hardly seems like a sensible command decision on Kirk's part, with Scott and Sulu having beamed down earlier and now missing. The Enterprise is without most of its top officers. More suspension of reality comes before the end of Act 1 as Kirk, Spock, and McCoy fall 10 feet onto a hard stone floor where they lie unconscious, but without having suffered broken bones, cuts, or concussions. Perhaps Catspaw should be viewed as a guilty pleasure. It is entertaining and, for its time and budget, reasonably well made. The director, photography, music, set design, and casting are all effective. The writing, from a perspective of pure entertainment, is not without its cleverness and not completely mindless. There are, after all, those underlying themes. Catspaw was scheduled to air 4 nights before Halloween in a new time slot with a younger audience. This then was a trick or treat, and Star Trek was now for the kids. Okay. And I'll get back to that after we've gone through the episode here. Let me take a drink of water right quick. Hold on just a moment. Okay. So we begin the episode with the Enterprise in orbit around Pyrus 7. Scotty and Sulu have previously beamed down to the planet, and the Enterprise has lost contact with them. Then they hear from Lieutenant Jackson, a member of the landing party, who requests that the Enterprise beam him up, and only him. Kirk asks where Scotty and Sulu are, but Jackson doesn't respond, and then Uhura says that the signal has been lost. And you can spot Eddie Paskey over at the engineering station back there in the background. Kirk and Spock go to the transporter, or at least they both leave the bridge, but Kirk and Dr. McCoy arrive in the transporter room. Jackson beams up and then immediately collapses. And McCoy says, "He's dead, Jim." Then a voice seems to speak from Jackson's dead body, warning Kirk that there is a curse upon his ship and that if they don't leave, everyone on board will die. Hail, Lord Thoth. Happy Halloween. Yeah, happy Halloween as well. Yeah, I mean, I understand how this might have been a bit spooky in 1960, 67, but I mean, I don't think it's really that scary by modern standards. Maybe a 5-year-old would be scared. I don't know. Okay, so Undeterred. Oh, yeah, and this episode is written by Robert Bloch. I should mention that as well. Okay, so Undeterred, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy beam down to the planet to retrieve Scotty and Sulu. And again, they do this without any security, which is kind of odd considering they've got 2 men missing, or 2 crewmen missing, 1 crewman already dead, and a dire warning about a curse. But they just beam down anyway. I'm guessing this is partly due to the reduced budgets that they had to work with in season 2. They just didn't want to pay for the extra crewmen. Okay, so they beam down, and Spock is picking up life readings on his tricorder, which is odd because the ship's sensors can't pick up any other life forms except the landing party. Kirk calls up to speak to them, and so Kirk has left Chief Assistant Engineer LaSalle in command of the ship. And we've seen LaSalle before. He was a lieutenant, and he was actually at the helm previously. And when I get into the background stuff, I'll talk about why they brought him in. But of course, this is our first appearance for Mr. Chekhov, Walter Koenig, who joins us in season 2. And this is his first appearance. And it is interesting that this is his first appearance on Star Trek, but for most of the episode, he's interacting with LaSalle. And the only real regular cast member he deals with is Uhura, because all the other regular cast are down on the planet. Okay. Now, Uhura tries to relay this information down to the planet, but again, the signal gets lost and she's unable to reach them. They advance towards the life readings, and then they are confronted by, and I just love this image, them standing there with Spock pointing. I don't know why, but I find that kind of funny. I almost made this the thumbnail because I just like this image. But they are confronted by 3 witches who warn them, Captain Kirk. And honestly, this episode almost feels like a Scooby-Doo episode to start off. I mean, this feels very cheesy. Like, I don't know, like maybe an old episode of Hardy Boys or something. But anyway, the witches remind Kirk of the curse and warn them that they're all going to die if they don't leave immediately. Of course, they continue on towards the life readings, and they find a large, rather forbidding looking castle. Again, something that their sensors did not detect. So they enter through the front door, and they are confronted by a black cat, which hisses at them before retreating. Now, after they enter the castle, they disappear from the ship's sensors. And Mr. Chekhov informs LaSalle that, they can't find anybody. They just disappeared. And LaSalle orders Chekhov to check the ship's equipment. Now, as they wander through the halls, the ground gives way beneath them, and they fall several feet, and the fall renders them all unconscious. They awaken to find themselves all chained up in a dungeon. And then Scotty and Sulu enter, and they're obviously in some sort of trance. And they don't respond when Kirk and the others try to speak with them. Scotty and Sulu free them, and then Kirk and Spock try to overpower them, but then they suddenly appear in another chamber, in a large kind of main hall. And it's here that they meet Korab, who invites them to dine with him, and he conjures up a large meal for them. And they have the cat. He has the cat with him, and he and the cat seem to be able to speak to one another. And Spock suggests that perhaps the cat is some sort of familiar, with Korab being a wizard. So then he creates a large banquet for them to eat, and they're reluctant at first, but eventually they sit down to dine with him. And then he conjures up plates full of gemstones to try and bribe them and get them to leave. The cat then leaves the room, but then immediately is replaced by a dark haired woman who Karab introduces as Sylvia. And she tells Kirk and the others that they have mind control abilities, and that's how they have ensnared Scotty and Sulu. But before she can tell more, Kirk overpowers Scotty and takes his phaser and then demands the return of their other weapons and equipment. Sylvia then produces a small facsimile of the Enterprise. Uh, she then returns one of their communicators and allows Kirk to contact the ship while she dangles this small miniature Enterprise over an open flame. So Kirk contacts the ship, and they report that the temperature on the ship has jumped tremendously, like 60 degrees in the last few minutes. As Chekhov says, "We're burning up, sir." So then Kirk admits that he's beat. So he then surrenders his weapons. Yeah. If it weren't for that meddling Federation. Yeah. If it weren't for that Targ and those meddling kids. All right. So back on the Enterprise, the temperature drops back down to normal, but they still can't contact the landing party. So Kirk observes that Karab and Sylvia seem to have some powerful telekinetic and telepathic abilities. But when Karab starts to elaborate, Sylvia interrupts, telling him to shut up. And I love this shot of him where he's just like, oh, okay. Karab, I don't know. Karab to me just kind of feels like a villain from the Batman show for some reason. I don't know why. I guess it's the costume and the colorful sets. I don't know. He feels like he'd fit very well on in an episode of the Adam West show. Now, McCoy observes that Karab and Sylvia took Scotty and Sulu prisoners and used them as catspaws to lure Kirk and the others down, hence the title of the episode. Of course, when asked if they wanted Kirk and the others to come down, then why warn them off with the threat of a deadly curse? I mean, those two things don't really kind of jive together, but okay, whatever. So Kirk tells them that a search party will come down for them. And then Karab tells him, no, there won't be any search parties. And then he places the miniature Enterprise into a block of glass. And it's not actually glass, it's actually lucite, but it looks like glass. Karab then tells Kirk that the Enterprise is trapped in a force field and the Enterprise can't leave it, and so there won't be any search party. And then they send them all back to the dungeon except for McCoy, who's told to stay behind. And back on the Enterprise, Chekhov tells LaSalle that there's some sort of energy field around us that we can't penetrate. Now, in the dungeon, Kirk wonders what's happening to McCoy. Uh, and it's interesting because he refers to McCoy as Doc in this scene. He does it a couple of times in this episode. He refers to McCoy as Doc, not as Bones or as McCoy, which is what he usually does. I don't think he calls McCoy Doc very often at all. I know this is the first time I remember hearing it as I've gone through these episodes. So they discuss the nature of Karab and Sylvia. Okay, hold on here. Okay. So they discuss the nature of Karab and Sylvia, noting that they said that they weren't native to this planet. They also seem to have extraordinary abilities, but clearly they have limits on them as they can control Scotty and Sulu, but they haven't been controlling Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. But then, just as they say that, Scotty, Sulu, and McCoy arrive, and now Bones is clearly mind controlled as well. They free Kirk from his shackles and take him to the main hall. Now, while this is going on, in the main hall, Karab and Sylvia argue, with Karab telling Sylvia that she has betrayed their purpose here. And Sylvia calls Karab a fool, saying that she enjoys being a physical being, having a physical existence, and she doesn't plan on giving it up. Karab says that they have a duty to the old ones, but Sylvia dismisses this, saying that they know nothing of physical sensation. He chides her for tormenting Kirk and the others, and Sylvia says that she enjoys that as well, warning Karab not to confront her or she will squash him. And again, we get a good reaction from Karab. He's like, "Whoa!" Then Kirk arrives, and she dismisses Karab, telling him to take them all away except Kirk. She then tells Kirk about how they come from a realm without physical sensation and that she enjoys experiencing it and she wants to experience more. And I think we all know where this is going. So Kirk starts putting the moves on her, telling her she's beautiful, and then she changes her appearance, becoming a couple of different women. At one point, she changes into this this little ensemble, and wow, this is hideous. this, I mean, it looks like she's wearing a mop on her head, and her outfit looks like it was made from like your grandma's sofa upholstery. I mean, what a hideous nightmare. I mean, I have no fashion sense at all, and even I'm like, good God, that's ugly. So Sylvia reveals she wants to get rid of Karab and make Kirk her partner, and other things, I'm guessing. And together, together they can rule the galaxy. Now, as they're making out, he begins working her for information, and she mentions that they have a device called the transmuter, and that they need that to take on physical form and do most of the, fancy tricks they perform. And she says that she'll show him how it works in time. But then Sylvia sees in Kirk's mind that he's trying to deceive her. And so she has him sent back to the dungeon. Plenty of dungeons in this episode. No dragons, though. Now, on the Enterprise, they create their own energy field to counter the force field they're trapped in, and the force field that Karab had put in place starts to weaken. Back on the planet, Karab frees Kirk and Spock and returns their phasers and tells them that they need to leave while they still can. Kirk refuses to leave without his men, But Karab says that they aren't his men anymore, noting that he can't control them and he can't control Sylvia either, warning that she may destroy them all. Now, in the halls, they're confronted by Sylvia, who has resumed her cat form, but now she's gigantic. Kirk tries to phaser her, but discovers that the phasers are drained and don't work. So they retreat to a locked room. I guess it's the dungeon again. I assume that's what it is. And Sylvia then knocks down the door, which falls on Karab, which crushes him. Kirk tries to help him, but Karab dies. So then he grabs the wand he was using earlier. And then he and Spock flee up through the ceiling back into the hallway where they had been at the beginning of the episode. They're immediately attacked by McCoy and Scotty and Sulu. Spock dispatches McCoy by nerve pinching him. Kirk throws Sulu against the door and he bonks his head on it and conveniently falls unconscious. And then he punches McCoy and knocks him out. And I swear, I mean, his fist is not even within half a foot of McCoy's chin. I mean, it's so fake looking. It's just so obvious that he didn't even touch him. But he quote unquote knocks out McCoy. Then they're confronted by Sylvia again, who's still a giant cat. So then Kirk grabs the wand or the transmuter. And then Sylvia turns back into her female form. She then transports Kirk to the main hall. And then again, she tries to appeal to him and get him to work with her. He claims that the transmuter is the source of their power. She says it's not the source, but it is kind of like an amplifier. It sort of focuses their abilities. And she offers to teach him how to use it. He refuses, so she pulls a phaser on him and orders him to hand it over. Instead, he smashes the crystal at the top of the transmuter, and then suddenly everything vanishes. Spock and the others find Kirk, who points out Karab's and Sylvia's true forms as some sort of kind of weird looking puppets, and notes that without the transmuter, they cannot survive. And they immediately die. And McCoy says something about how so it was all just illusions then. And Kirk says, not all an illusion. Jackson is still dead. So then they beam back up to the Enterprise and the episode ends there. And I mean, these puppets are just, it's been a long time since I'd seen this episode. So I had forgotten this little bit here. And I swear, when I saw these things, what it made me think of, uh, where is it? Was the prawn from the Muppets. I mean, that's what they look like to me. I mean, it looks really bad. It looks really bad. But apparently now, of course, this stuff's been digitally remastered. The episodes I'm watching, and apparently in the original footage, especially after it was changed into high definition, redone in high definition, you could actually see the strings working the puppets. So, it would have looked even worse. At least the strings got digitally edited out. But oh my gosh, it looks bad. Okay. And oh yeah, and by the way, yeah, I'm gonna give this episode a D personally. Just not a big fan of it overall. I would have given it a C, uh, but yeah, that final scene with those puppets, it's just like yikes. Okay. All right. Now, well, let me go back. Let's see. Or actually, no, that's not the one I want. Where? There we go. Okay, so this episode is written by Robert Bloch, as mentioned before. This was his second episode. Um, his original being What Little Girls Are Made Of from the first season. Robert Bloch's script for What Are Little Girls Made Of had to be heavily rewritten by Gene Roddenberry. If not for Bloch's high esteem among science fiction fans and horror fans, he might never have been invited back. Bloch's next story idea, which was titled Sleeping Beauty, treaded on territory similar to what had been explored in Space Seed, and so Star Trek passed on it. In its place, Roddenberry and Kuhn suggested he do what he did best, the macabre. They wanted a Halloween story, Bloch told Starlog magazine in 1986. And Jay Rocker says, yes, I remember seeing the original with the strings, definitely bad. Yeah. I mean, I understand, it was, they were limited at the time by, what you could do in terms of effects, but yikes. It's just, oof. I wanted to do something that would involve changes in appearances. So I decided that instead of having the usual Jekyll and Hyde transformation, I'd have a female who was capable of chameleon like adaptations, and the rest just fell into place. Dorothy Fontana, offering insight as to how the story meetings were going for the second season, recalls, quote, we all sat in on the script pitches. It was Roddenberry who usually would say yes because he was usually there. But if he wasn't there and Gene Kuhn said yes, I don't think it was ever thrown out. Roddenberry knew that Kuhn had good sense of what would work on the show, but Roddenberry made himself available for those pitches. As he had done with Little Girls, Bloch borrowed elements from one of his own short stories, this time Broomstick Ride, first published in December of 1957. For that tale, an Earthship arrives to explore a planet called Pyrus, where the captain and his crew encounter what seem to be witches and warlocks. The witches can read minds, and because of the images they see in the subconscious of the Earthmen, they believe the humans present a danger. To defend themselves, the leader of the witches conjures up a miniature of the Earth ship and throws it into the hot coals of a brazier. This causes the real ship to explode. For Catspaw, Bloch kept the name Pyrus, the witches, the mind reading, the misunderstanding concerning the subconsciousness, and the creation of a miniature spaceship to be subject to intense heat. As for the episode's title, according to Webster, Catspaw means a dupe or a person used by another to do dangerous, distasteful, or unlawful work, as Scott, Sulu, and McCoy do under the mental influence of Sylvia. Bloch did a free polish of his March 9th outline, delivering a new story draft on March 14th. Robert Justman was not pleased with it, however. Kuhn didn't want to wait for Justman's specific criticisms, and he sent the treatment to NBC. And Stan Robertson, the network man at NBC that they dealt with, he wasn't happy with it either. And this episode went through a lot of rewriting, as many Star Trek episodes do. Here it was mainly an issue with all the effects shots. And they also wanted a lot of the, sort of spooky, horror-ish elements really toned down. Yeah, Robertson felt the material betrayed too many dark themes. And there were things that could not be allowed to happen in Star Trek. Take the killing off of a regular character. So in the original version of the script, it's Sulu who beams up to the ship and then dies at the beginning of the episode, not Jackson. Jessamine also counted too many challenging sets, including the exterior and interior of the castle with corridors, dungeons, and a great hall. Beyond the sets, Jessamine saw red regarding the various animals one creeping, others flying, and the animal tricks that would be needed. Then there was Block's tendency to recycle ideas, even if those ideas did not come from one of his own earlier stories. Besides making reference to the old ones, as he had in What Little Girls Are Made Of, he also borrowed from Roddenberry and the first Star Trek pilot. Justman pointed out, Sylvia's dialogue in scenes 106 and 109 is very reminiscent of Vena's dialogue in the menagerie. Block was allowed to keep the reference to the old ones, but the dialogue in scenes 106 and 109 had to go. There was extensive rewriting from the staff that led to a pair of interesting scenes between Karab and Sylvia, creating conflict between the two, but also establishing the story's new theme and examining how pleasure can lead to moral corruption. In one, Sylvia caresses her form and says, "We have none of this, and I like it. To feel, to touch, to understand the idea of luxury. I like it, Karab, and I don't intend to leave it." Karab responds, "We have a duty to the old ones." Sylvia fires back, "What do they know of sensations? This is a new world." Karab scolds, "You are cruel. You torture our specimens." She smugly responds, "That too is a sensation I find stimulating. I will squash you, Karab, and that too would be an interesting sensation as well." Kuhn handed it off to story consultant Dorothy Fontana. She later said, "I didn't do much to change the characters and certainly not the surprise at the end that these little things weren't actually the powerful creatures we thought they were, but there was a lot of dialogue rewriting. Many of the things Fontana scaled down or completely removed involved the cat. Block had Kirk, Spock, and McCoy first meet the animal outside the castle as the little rascal pushes the giant door open. Fontana solved a potential production problem by having the door open on its own. Block had Sylvia, while in the form of the giant cat, claw Karab with a huge paw. Fontana changed this and had Karab retreat behind the heavy dungeon door, which is then knocked down, landing on him, pinning him down. And then she tossed out a swarm of bats, or she removed a swarm of bats that appeared in the episode. As for the additions, it was in Fontana's draft where the small metallic model of the Enterprise was encased into a clear glass block, thus putting a force field around the real Enterprise and preventing any further rescue attempts. The changes Fontana made, in fact, were enough for her name to be added to the title page of the script right under that of Robert Bloch. But she balked, saying, quote, "I insisted my name be taken off because I didn't feel I had done that much. As I recall, it was Gene Kuhn who put my name on the script, and I said, no, don't." Roddenberry got the script next and made cuts of his own, including, unfortunately, a scene that opened Act 1 in sickbay. In this deleted scene, McCoy reports to Kirk regarding Jackson's death and says, quote, "There's no sign of an injury, none, no organic damage, internal or external." Kirk asks, "Then why is Jackson dead?" And McCoy answers, "He froze to death." Spock counters, "That doesn't seem reasonable, Doctor. The climate on Pyrus 7 approximates that of Earth's central western hemisphere during the summer solstice." McCoy says, "I know that, Spock, but reasonable or unreasonable, Jackson froze to death. He was literally dead on his feet when he materialized in the transporter." Kirk ponders this, saying, quote, "He was about to speak. Someone spoke. There seems to be a good deal more down on the planet than our sensors have been able to detect, with Scott and Sulu virtually marooned down there." Kirk is interrupted by a call from the bridge, where it tells him that the sensors no longer register Scott and Sulu, and in fact indicate no life on the surface at all. Kirk then makes the decision to beam down. Let's see. As rewritten, all of this was replaced by the captain's log voiceover, with Kirk telling us, quote, "I am beaming down to the planet's surface to find my two missing crewmen and discover what killed Jackson." Roddenberry also added more sizzle to the hedonistic Sylvia. It was Kuhn during the last of his script polishing who added the delightful line where Kirk tells Spock that he would be a natural for Halloween. All right. Let me see here. Okay, did I not? Huh, okay, I guess I forgot to capture it, but Joseph Pevney was the director for this episode. A new second season deal had been drafted. So now, effectively, Joseph Pevney and Mark Daniels would, generally speaking, with just a few exceptions, alternate episodes as Star Trek's two resident in house directors. All the primary characters were present for the first voyage of the new season, and Walter Koenig was introduced as Ensign Chekhov. Let's see. I can find him. There he is. Pevney, who had previously directed Koenig in an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, said, quote, I thought he would be an interesting Russian-type fellow, so I brought him in, and he had a new career. He looked great. He's got a great face. He had some kind of an interesting accent, but it sure wasn't Russian. In any event, who cares? Now, Antoinette Boyer, who played Sylvia, there we go. Let's see. She was having a field day as the lustful, sensuous, power mad Sylvia, and she was no stranger to TV. She often appeared as strong willed females and had recently played one on Gene Coon's previous series, The Wild Wild West. Now, Theodore Marcuse was perfect as Korab. He was 37 or 47, excuse me. Let me go back to him. His menacing looks kept him active in television for 16 years. Typecast as villains and megalomaniacs, he had recently played the commandant of Devil's Island on two different episodes of television during the same year, 1966, and once in an episode for the Wild Wild West, and then again in an episode of Time Tunnel. Sadly, Marcuse was killed in an automobile accident on November 29th, 1967, roughly 1 month after episode Catspaw aired on television. His final role, which was another appearance on the Wild Wild West, aired a few months later. J. Jimmy Jones made his first appearance of many on Star Trek. He played Jackson, so let me bring him back up here. There he is. Even though his character crewman Jackson's dies. The fall Jones takes the transporter platform hints that he was also a stuntman. Quote, in the first episode I did, Catspaw, I was dead the minute you saw me, Jones said. They needed an actor who could do his own falls. My father thought that the series was great, but I didn't like science fiction. It wasn't until the episode aired that I realized what a terrific show it was. When I got my Catspaw script, my only line was one to beam up. I had no idea what that meant. So the next day, a neighborhood kid went by on his bicycle, and I asked him, hey, do you watch Star Trek? And he said, yeah. And I asked, do you know what beam up means? And then this kid explained everything to me. The next Star Trek job for Jones, beyond doubling for, he would be a body double for James Doohan in Who Mourns for Adonias, which is just a couple of episodes away. But he would also appear as Ensign Mallory in The Apple. He would be beamed in that one as well, and he would die there again as well. Jones said, quote, Gene Roddenberry took a liking to me, and the word came down I was to get as much work as I could handle. Now, Michael Barrier was back for the third time as Lieutenant DeSalle. And as mentioned before, well, I'll just go there. He played Lieutenant LaSalle previously. His other episodes were The Squire of Gothos and This Side of Paradise. This was actually Barrier's last episode of Star Trek, despite the understanding with Gene Coon that he would continue as a recurring character. And I'll get to that a little later when I get to the actual filming of the episode. But they actually had a plan, a long-term plan for LaSalle to be a recurring character. Of course, they had several of those. They had several instances where they had plans for some actor to come back in a recurring role, and it just didn't happen for whatever reason. And LaSalle was one of those. John Winston made his fourth of 11 appearances on Star Trek, again playing the transporter chief, Lieutenant Kyle. And I was actually just recently, I was watching Star Trek 2 again, and I realized, or no, Star Trek 3. It's Star Trek 3. And Kyle is on the, what is it? He's on the science vessel, Grissom. He's on the USS Grissom. He's one of the crewmen on there. He's on the bridge. I mean, they call him Mr. Kyle, but I don't know. I never made the connection before that it's the same actor. It's the same guy from the original series. I hadn't realized it. So Kyle died on the Grissom eventually. So kind of sad. All right. Of the regulars, William Shatner never looked better. After a few months off from Star Trek's grueling schedule, he had slimmed down considerably. Okay. Filming of the second season began on Tuesday, May 2nd, 1967. The mood was generally good. All were happy to be back making more Star Trek. The Emmy nominations had been announced, and Star Trek was up for numerous awards, most notably Best Dramatic Series. As covered in These Are the Voyages Season 1, this had never happened before with a science fiction series. Despite the good news and exuberant feelings, the seeds of discontent had been planted at this time. One concerning Shatner and Nimoy, the other having to do with Shatner and the front office. Days before Catspaw commenced production, the latest issue of TV Guide featured the Mr. Spock is Dreamy article by Isaac Asimov, making much ado over Nimoy's character and not a word about Shatner. And I talked about that I forget which episode it is, but I talked about that article in one of the season 1 Trek Talks. I think it was around mid-season, I think. The media attention had clearly shifted, and now there was buzz concerning Nimoy's upcoming record album release, Mr. Spock's Music from Space, which was scheduled for June, along with scuttlebutt about his contract disputes with Roddenberry and Desilu and the doubling of his salary. With the morning issue of Daily Variety came the news that Nimoy had just been nominated for an Emmy as Best Supporting Actor, while the series' lead, Shatner, had been ignored. Shatner had good reason to feel his position on the series was being challenged. His instincts as an actor and a star would have him fight to secure his personal status, and Kirk's dominance in the scripts. Nimoy would feel compelled to compete and fight for his and Spock's place. All right, let me take a drink of water right quick. All right. Much had changed between Nimoy and the series writers and producers as well. Despite his recent victory in the contract dispute, or perhaps because of it, Nimoy suspected there was an inclination in the writers' room to diminish Spock's importance in the series. In fact, on this day of filming, with the company's move from the bridge to transporter room set, Spock somehow got lost along the way. Yeah, one of the things I noticed when watching this episode is right at the beginning when, after Kirk orders that Jackson beamed up, he and Spock leave the bridge to go to the transporter room. But then when we go to the transporter room, Spock doesn't show up. He's gone. And instead, McCoy shows up. This created a continuity mistake in the episode's teaser. Yeah, I just talked about that. Nimoy later complained that the writers were so focused on Kirk and so much less on Spock that some of the scenes in script established both characters entering a room where Kirk would then do all the talking. Spock would react by arching an eyebrow, and then Kirk would leave alone. The writers, Nimoy said, had forgotten that Spock was even there. It seemed an outrageous accusation, yet the script for Catspaw supports Nimoy's memory and validates his hurt feelings. Kuhn, Roddenberry, and Fontana, all having had a hand in these rewrites, not only dropped the character while en route to the transporter, but failed to catch the mistake. Director Joseph Pesney also failed to catch it. In defense of the aforementioned writers, producers, and director, though, Nimoy was given the script days ahead of time, and as a provision of his new contract, he was allowed to give notes on the script, and he apparently failed to catch it too. Okay, so they started production, see, on day one. All right, so on the first day of filming, they had an addition to the lore of Star Trek. This is the first episode where we get our first mention of credits, the currency that is being used in the future. So again, this is at a point before the Federation has gotten rid of money. Although they haven't gotten rid of money, they have, but they haven't. You know, it's I don't know. Um, Lieutenant DeSalle mentions it when talking about trying to penetrate the force field. He says, well, maybe we can't break it, but I'll give you credits to Navy beans. We can put a dent in it. Now, apparently, where this derives from is from the script for The Trouble with Tribbles. Writer David Gerrold gets credit for coming up with credit. It was in his first story outline of Gerrold's The Trouble with Tribbles, originally titled The Fuzzies, which was had already been delivered to the offices the previous March, and Gene Coon had read it while he was doing his polishing on the script of Catspaw. As for DeSalle, who wears a red top instead of the gold seen during the first season, Captain Kirk's log entry established him as being the assistant chief engineer, indicating a promotion from helmsman. There was a reason that Gene Coon went out of his way to put this line into the script and accordingly changed DeSalle's uniform color. With Scott now the third highest ranking officer on the Enterprise, promoted to lieutenant commander in the series Bible for this new season, and being the one to command the bridge in the absence of Kirk and Spock, Coon decided there was a need for someone to be running engineering when these things happened. DeSalle was given the job, and actor Michael Barrier, as reported on this day in the same issue of Daily Variety, was signed on for a recurring role. Within weeks, however, as more new scripts came in, it was realized that when Scott was left in command, the scripted action always played between the bridge and whatever was happening with Kirk and Spock on the planet, with no side trips to engineering really needed. So DeSalle's promotion wound up having the opposite effect of what happened, and this was actually Michael Barrier's final appearance on the series. Let's see. Okay, so a detailed miniature of the Enterprise was created by David Bud Morton for this episode and used in filming. Let me see if I can find that. No. Okay. Okay, there it is. There we go. Okay. There was only one of these miniatures made, so this miniature was the only one, and it was first filmed from the scene where Sylvia dangles it over a candle flame. The small metal miniature is then seen again, this time encased in a block of lucite. There we go. This miniature was later donated to the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum by Matt Jeffries, still encased in the lucite. So I guess it probably still is like that to this day, I would guess. I don't know if it's actually on display or not. It may. My guess is it's probably in storage. Okay, so Joseph Pevney, who is usually good at staying on schedule, as proven with Arena, fell behind during the filming of Catspaw, which stretched out to 7.5 days. The main blame for this delay fell on the cat. The average episode of the series required 36,000 feet of exposed film. With all the specialty shots, including the animal shots and retakes of those animal shots, this first attempt at a reduced budget ate up 45,650 feet of film. And this too pushed the final cost higher than anyone dreamed it would go for this episode. Of the end result, for all the hard work from those involved, let me get back here. There we go. Where writer Robert Bloch said, quote, "I do have some quibbles about the way in which things were done. It wasn't their fault, but they just didn't have the budget. Catspaw cried out for the use of opticals and post-production effects. Shooting a cat's face in tight close-up is not exactly any substitute for having a giant cat. Running down a few feet of cardboard corridors isn't the same thing as having your characters trapped in a labyrinth of frightening proportions." William Shatner concurred, saying, quote, "Unfortunately, due to the usual budgetary constraints, we couldn't afford the necessary optical effects that would have made the giant cat seem more realistic and scary. And the heavy black strings used to guide the puppets of Alien Sylvia and Alien Karab are distinctly noticeable." Yeah, let's go back to that. Jeez. Indeed, dark-colored thread is visible when used to make the alien puppet creatures move. Now, again, as in this version of it I have, they're not visible because this stuff's been redone digitally, and the strings are edited out, thankfully. Um, let's see, where was it? Okay, as the creatures die, the strings go lax. This is noticeable now, but it wasn't so noticeable in 1967 when television sets were smaller and they weren't in high definition. Although, as Jay Rocker said, he remembered seeing the strings. So apparently they were visible on some sets. However, budget-wise, the new season was getting off to an alarming start. The studio mandated per episode allowance was now down to 185,000. The total cost of Cat's Paw was 217,285. This equates to more than 1.5 million in 2013, and this was more than any studio was willing to spend for a TV show in 1967. It was certainly more than Desilu could afford. Hail, Gwagnar. Good to see you, sir. Thank you for stopping by. And again, if you haven't, please do like the stream and sub to the channel while you're here. 1.5 million would seem to be a very good budget, but in 2013, however, studios spend between 2 and 3 million for an episode of a 1-hour drama. Taking this into consideration, the Star Trek company was being asked to do an awful lot with terribly little. One episode was in the can, and Star Trek already had a second season deficit of $28,260. This would have to be made up, or else. All right, so Catspaw aired 4 days before Halloween in 1967. Talking to this author, Dorothy Fontana said, quote, "That was planned all along to be a Halloween show. When Robert Bloch pitched it, we said, that's got to be the Halloween show for sure. I liked it. I thought it was pretty good." Okay, so this aired on Friday, October 27th. So in the first half hour, and again, this is airing on Friday nights from 8:30 to 9:30. So in the first half hour from 8:30 to 9, Star Trek was second in the ratings with a 27.6 audience share. although this was way behind Gomer Pyle, which won the night at 41.8%, and just barely ahead of another show on ABC called Hondo, which was at 25.5%. And it was, again, just barely second in the ratings ahead of Hondo in the second half hour and a good bit behind the CBS Friday night movie. Catspaw was great fun for the kids on a Friday night just before Halloween, but so was Gomer Pyle. And the latter, one of the top rated shows on TV, easily won its time slot. This would be the cause, or would be the case throughout Star Trek's second season. Hondo, ABC's new 1 hour Western, came in third, also a common occurrence during the year. Star Trek was almost always fitted in the middle. The movie at 9 p.m. was the 1963 adventure film Rampage, starring Robert Mitchum. NBC provided little back-end support to Star Trek and gave many in the viewing audience a good reason to join Mitchum on CBS. Back in the days before VCRs and later DVRs, you either watched it or you missed it. If you were the head of a family that was spending an evening together around the TV, and most American homes had only one television set at this time, and you chose Star Trek, then you would have to join the movie on CBS already in progress, or go to ABC for the start of The Guns of Will Sonnet. And not many wanted to stick around with NBC. According to AC Nielsen, out of the 11,870,000 households that tuned in for Catspaw, only 7,170,000 stayed for what followed, the unpopular Jerry Van Dyke sitcom Accidental Family. And only about 5,880,000 of them stayed for the 10 p.m. show. An ABC News documentary called Justice for All about how difficult it was for people in America to afford lawyers. Things were going exactly as industry experts had predicted, and not in a good way for Star Trek. Also, the week that Catspaw first aired, NBC's parent company, RCA, began running ads in numerous periodicals using images from Star Trek to help promote its new line of color TV sets. Star Trek was NBC's most colorful show. It was a match made in an ad man's heaven. I wonder if I can bring that up. Let me see if I can bring that up right quick. So I guess we'll say what Star Trek RCA advertisement, I guess. I don't know. 1960s. Let's see. Oh yeah, here it is. Let's see, can I open it? There we go. Let me bring this up. There it is. When you're first in color TV, there's got to be a reason. Okay, now around the time that the second season was starting, Gene Roddenberry got received a memo from someone else in the TV industry. It read, quote, "Dear Gene, I felt compelled to write you this fan letter to tell you how much I've enjoyed Star Trek. I'm quite happy that you're moving to a new time slot next season. It will ease my conscience about watching Star Trek instead of my show. Best wishes for continued success. Regards, Dick Michaels, Screen Gems associate producer, Bewitched." So, the associate producer of Bewitched was a Star Trek fan, apparently, which is a bit ironic since really it was the success of Bewitched against Star Trek that probably was Star Trek's downfall in the long run. And then Roddenberry had a response. "Dear Dick, thank you for your letter. Not only was it good to hear from you, but sentiments were most flattering. Since I'm a Bewitched fan, the move to Friday night is enjoyable for me also. Best to everyone there. Sincerely, Gene Roddenberry." Okay. And then Antoinette Bauer, of her time on the show, she said, quote, "We spent most of our time trying to seduce the cat into coming through the tunnel. And it was a fun job mainly because of the lovely cast, who obviously had no idea that Star Trek would become the huge cult thing that it still is." Okay. So that will be it for Catspaw. All right. Next week, I'll be looking at Metamorphosis. And what comes after that? Let me check. Yeah, and then Friday's Child after that. Okay. So again, if you would, please do like this stream before you leave. And thanks to everyone for checking out the stream. I do appreciate it. And I don't know. I guess I will go ahead and end it there. I will be doing a review of Captain America Brave New World. I believe that opens Thursday. So I'll try to have a review for that up probably Friday or Saturday. And yeah, I guess until the next Trek Talk, take care, everyone, and have a good evening.